Now, our guest speaker today, many of you may know, I just forgot your last name,
McGuire.
McGuire.
That's right. It's okay.
He's been teaching at Crestview in the youth, but he is a professor. He's a professional teacher, folks. He's taught. He teaches at UT, Mary Hardin Baylor. He's taught at SMU. He teaches in the areas of leadership, strategic planning, sort of like management type courses. So interested to hear what he has to share with us today, and I hope that you will make him feel welcome. Mac?
Okay, thank you.
It's yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Doesn't Carolyn do a great job? I mean, day in, day out. And for those of you who have not heard her sing, you're missing something. She's a true blessing there too. But I love to sit in the balcony and watch her sing in the choir because it helps me worship. I don't know about you. So let me talk a little bit about heaven. What made me start thinking about heaven was the fact that in 2001, my father was in a nursing home and he was passing away. Old World War II vet, and I have 30 years, 1 month, 10 days, and 14 minutes in the Army myself. So my dad was very upset. Here he was, a lay minister, and we had started a couple of churches, and he said, you know, you can go to church or I'm going to beat you to death, and he'd gotten close to that a couple of times. So I loved church, having those two options presented to me. And so, but as my daddy was about to die, we were sitting on the porch of the nursing home, and what amazed me was he was worried. I mean, here's my dad who had been this tall, to me, imposing figure. And here he is with one of his legs cut off because of diabetes type 2, and he's worried about heaven. And I'm thinking, if he's worried about heaven, I better get serious, thinking about it myself. So I began on a quest 12 years ago to try to find out what is heaven. And I found out that George Barna talks about the fact that many times pastors don't talk about heaven, and yet that's where we're striving to go. So I want to share some of that with you today about some of those questions, because when I saw this, when I asked my father and he says, I can't wait to get there, but I don't want to go. Then I started thinking about when it's time for me to go. And I think when our parents pass away, I don't know about you, but when my father passed away, it caused me to deal with heaven more personally than I'd ever done before. I don't know if you feel that way or not. So I want to tell you a little story first, because I think this kind of talks a little bit about what we think about heaven. But there was a lady named Florence Chadwick in 1952, and I don't know if many of you knew about her. I did not know about her until I started doing my research. But I found out that she was an incredible swimmer, an Olympic athlete. And she was going to swim from Catalina to California, an island off the coast of California. And it was going to take about 15 hours. And she had trained, and she had coaches, and she had these people that took her under their wing, and she was confident that she could make it. But she called her mother, and she asked her mother if she would ride in the lead boat. And I don't know if you know much about swimming. I don't either, but I only swam when I had to. Kind of like running in the Army. The Army always thought that if you ran, you were smarter. I never did figure that out either. But she asked her mother to take off work and be in this lead boat. And when you swim like this, you have a lead boat and you have boats on the side to make sure the sharks don't get you or whatever else might happen, so that you'll be safe. And so she started her swim, but she noticed that the water was a little bit colder than what it had ever been before. And then she noticed that it seemed like she didn't have the energy that she had had before, that she had planned for this experience. And then as fog rolled in. And so she's got all these things going on, and she thought she could see the island 2 or 3 different times, see California from the island 2 or 3 times as she's making this swim. And the closer she got, she thought she could see California. And then this fog rolled in, and she forgot what she was looking for. And she talks about that later. She said, I've got to quit. And her mother encouraged her and said, listen, you can't quit. You've tried, you've planned this for a long time. You've got to finish the race. And eventually she did quit. And they went toward California, and she was less than 100 yards from the coast. And she told this story, but because she told this story that it kind of goes back to the heaven and the rewards. Sometimes we go through life and we struggle and we struggle and we struggle and we swim. And then all of a sudden we lose sight about what we're really swimming toward. And so I wanted to kind of talk about heaven today with you. Now, this with a little humor, as I try to interject, because I know that young people love humor. This doctor is talking to this patient, and all of you are young people, right? Right, that's what I'm thinking. So always connect with your audience. Very important to do that. So the doctor calls this patient in. He tells this patient, he said, listen, you've got some serious issues. He said, you got 10. He said, what? Wait, what is it? He said, 10 days, 10 months, 10 years. He said, 9, 8, 7, 6. Some of you didn't get that one. Okay, let's move on. So, another poll in Time Magazine. I thought this was very interesting. 81% of people that were polled in Time Magazine not known as a conservative magazine, 81% believed in heaven, 13 didn't, 6 didn't know if there was a heaven or not. They weren't for sure. 76 now believe they were going to heaven, but 48% of that 76 believed that they knew some of their friends weren't going. They'd already made that decision. So, on an Indiana cemetery tombstone, Paul, stranger, when you pass me by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you will be. So prepare for death and follow me. And then someone wrote this. An unknown passerby scratched these additional words on that tombstone. To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went. So I think that's probably true. So how do we get to heaven? Now, we all know this, but I have to put this in here because this is, in essence, the key. My father knew he was going to heaven and didn't want to go, which lets me kind of know that maybe we really don't understand what heaven is, or maybe we would look forward to it a little bit with more interest, perhaps. So in 1 John 5, 12, 15, it says, he who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. Kind of ties into what Pastor Dan was saying. Isn't that amazing? I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God so that you may know that you have eternal life. So we don't have to worry about that. But getting there, having the time to get there, it may concern us. So my dad and his death, where is he? I started thinking about, okay, where is my dad? Where is he right now? What is time like in heaven? One of the questions I'm going to try to answer today. When do we actually go to be with Jesus? Because my research has revealed something very strange. Even some religious authors are starting to say that there's an intermediate heaven. There's a place where we wait, which is not scripturally sound. So as I started work, of course, I'm a lay person just like you. So I'm not, Jack knows more about the Bible than I will ever know if I started today. He's probably the best Sunday school teacher I have ever seen in my entire life. I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but he certainly is. And when he's with my MBA students at Mary Hardin Baylor, he's that good too. He's great. So when do we go to be with Jesus? What will it be like in heaven? Will we have new bodies? The older I get, the more I would like to have a younger body. I don't know if y'all know about that. I work out at Georgetown Fitness, and I've got this guy that's my trainer, and he says, you ought to be able to do this. I said, if I was 40, I should be able to do that. But at 62 is a little bit different than that. So, and what is heaven and hell like? Because that's kind of the choice we have, is it not? So, I found this quote that I think is really good. Death is the chariot our Heavenly Father sends to bring us to Himself. I really like that. Lutcher's got a book, 1 Minute After You Die, one of my research books. It's a great book because it tells us what happens that very moment after we pass away. So I'm thinking about time. And in my mathematical calculations, I don't know if this is right or not, but Peter says that one day is like 1,000 years. So if that's true, then Jesus has been gone about 48 hours in God's time. My dad died in 2001. He's been gone about 20 minutes. To us, I mean to him, to us, to me, he's been gone 12 years, and I miss him badly. But to him, it's only been 20 minutes. So when do we actually go to be with Jesus? At the very moment of death. I believe that is true. Because we find this in Luke 23, 42, and 43. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, I tell you the truth, today you'll be with me in paradise. So I'm hanging on to that. I'm believing that is the truth. The very moment we stop living, we will be with him in his presence. Now, the other thing that I found in my research is the fact that they have changed the way that people die now. Have you heard about that? You can't die like you normally die. Now they have ways to bring you back. And so a person is not technically dead until that brain cessation of all activity takes place. And so they have redefined what death looks like and when death actually happens. And whether you are in a hospital situation or whether you're at home. If you're at home, you probably are going to pass away. But if you're in a hospital, there's a really good chance they can bring you back, which has made me go out and put that do not resuscitate. Because I'm ready to go, I think. My wife it aggravates her sometimes when I say that. But I think I'm ready to go. Now, my comptroller friend, I want to tell you a little story. I think that all of us have got to look for these opportunities where we can make a statement for God. And I think you can make more statements than what you ever dreamed of. I had this really good friend at the comptroller. I taught at the comptroller leadership development program for about 10 years, and I met this lady, Ladine Dorsett, and she was a wonderful person. We had lunch together every time I was there. We prayed at lunch, and she was a sister. She was my sister in Christ. We went to one of the lunches, and I'll never forget this because she looked at me across the table, and she said, I just got back from my doctor, and my doctor said I've got 6 weeks. I said, 6 weeks for what? She said, to live. She said, now I know that, I've given my life to Jesus, so I know I'm going to heaven, but I'm not really ready. Which kind of led me to the belief, I don't know that we'll ever get ready. But she said, I'm really worried about this. And I said, well, I'll pray about this. This can't be right. Listen to me. You're too much of a vibrant, wonderful person. This can't be right. So we're going to pray this away. And we tried to do that. One night, I got back from a trip. I travel a lot doing consulting and public speaking. And so I got back from a trip, and I got a phone call from Seton Hospital, and they said that she was there and she was in a coma. And her mother had asked for me. Now, I had never met her mother. So I go to the hospital, and I get there, and I step off the elevator, and their family is right outside the elevator space there. And her mother comes to me, and she said, are you Dr. Mack? With her hands in a prayerful mode. I said, yes. She said, I need you to go pray for my daughter. I said, ma'am, I am not a minister. She said, I don't need a minister. I need her friend. I didn't know how to handle that. And even today, it causes me pause. She said, I want you to pray for my daughter. We need 24 more hours. She said, I know she's got to go, and she's ready to go, but I need you to pray for her. And I said again to her, I said, ma'am, why don't we I said, I know some pastors, as I work with several churches. I know some pastors, and let me call one of them. She said, no, you're not listening to me. And I wasn't. She said, I need you to pray for her because you're her friend. I want you to take her hand. I want you to take my hand. And I want you to pray that she comes out of this coma. We've already had 3 doctors tell us she can't come out of the coma. It is impossible. It is impossible. I said, well, nothing is impossible when God's there. So I did that. I prayed for 24 more hours. About 10:30, she woke up out of the coma. started talking to them, and they had a great, wonderful, they stayed up all night. Isn't it funny that when something like that's taking place, there is no time? Time doesn't matter, as probably some of you have been in that situation. So, and then they called me about 10:30 as I got back to Georgetown from Austin. And I try not to go into Austin at all unless I have to. That's why I moved to Georgetown. So, but anyway, when I got back home, her mother called me on the phone, and I left her the number, and she called me, and she said she's up and she's talking to us. Thank you so much for letting God use you. I had never heard it put like that before. She shocked me. She said she's up. She said one of these doctors came in. She said, he looks like he's 12. Have you noticed how the doctors have gotten younger? You go to see these specialists and they're like 12. My mother's in Lubbock, and I went over there to visit one of her doctors, and this young lady came in, and I said, "Are you out of junior high yet?" I don't know if that's just me or you, but anyway, the mother told me, she said, she spent a wonderful time with us, and that morning I had to go out on another trip. They called me right before I left the house, and she said she passed away, but she stayed up with us all night long, laid back down, and died. So I think the thing for us to think about is how can you be used? Because you're not through yet making a difference. And we got to think about those ways that we can do that. I want to share one more thing with you. The other day I was at H-E-B. I love going shopping at H-E-B. I mean, I know you think I'm crazy or something, but I love shopping at H-E-B because I was raised on a little small farm in East Texas. We had to grow our own food. And I always loved to go into H-E-B, and I can pick out anything I want. And I didn't have to hoe or anything else with it. So, I mean, I'm thinking it's really good. I even asked my wife, do we need something? So I can go to H-E-B. So I know everybody at H-E-B because I can talk to the Walmart greeter about 30 minutes. So, when they say, how's everything going, I tell them. But in H-E-B, I was in there one day, and I was behind this older lady, and we were going through the express lane. There wasn't many lanes open because I just got back from the gym, and so I was trying to kind of sneak in there and get some things and get out before anybody would see me looking like I looked. And this older lady was in front of me, and she had run her groceries across, and it was $24.78. And I saw her unsnap. She had a purse there that could feed an infantry squad for about a week. If it had food in it. And so she unsnapped and unzipped. I have never heard so many snaps, zippers pop in my entire life. And she's trying to pull out the bill's $24.78, and she's putting a wrinkled dollar up there and then a quarter. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to have a birthday before I get out of here, which was 6 months away. So then this voice, and I believe God talks to us all. I believe God talks to us all. When I was working, I couldn't hear it very well. Now that I'm not working as much, I can hear it better. But this voice said to me, pay for her groceries. Now, I used to think this was just, I didn't want to tell anybody about this because I would think you'd have me committed, So anyway, I pulled out a 20 and a 5, and I handed the lady, the cashier, and I said, I want to pay for her groceries. And she looked at me and she said, do you know her? I said, no. She said, well, that's not right. I said, I know. I'm thinking that very same thing about this point in time. So she took the money, and this lady is still snapping and zipping or unzipping and putting money up there. She's got about $5.50 up there, and then she realizes she doesn't have enough money to pay for this stuff. So now she's thinking about what does she give back. And so then, she can't hear thunder. You know what I'm saying? I've got a hearing loss myself, but the cashier said, he's already paid for your groceries. And she said, he can't do that. And she turned to me, and with a frown on her face, she said, let me tell you something, young man. I appreciated that. She said, let me tell you something, young man. You can't pay for my groceries. And I stepped back. And I said, ma'am, I sure can't. And then I stepped forward and I said, but God can. And I don't believe you're big enough to tell him no. Are you? To which she started smiling, and she came around and hugged me. Then the lady at the checkout hugged me, and then she got 2 other ladies to hug me. And because I'm a big hugging person anyway, and they already know that. So she gave me 22 cents back, and when my food went across there, it was $7.78, and she gave me another 22 cents worth of change. Then the checker at HEB said this out loud. I just saw a God thing. She announced that to all the other people around me. And any hope of getting in and out of HEB without everybody looking at the way I was dressed wasn't going to take place. So what is it going to be like in heaven? New bodies. I'm not going to read both of these to you, but I want to read that first one. For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, when we die and leave these bodies, we will have a home in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God Himself and not by human hands. I want my body when I was like 22. I mean, if we get an option on that thing. That's the one I want. Maybe with a beard, but I don't know if I could have hair at 20. But anyway, now the other book, Heaven Can Wait. Have you read that book, Heaven Can Wait, about that little boy's experience? It's a great book to read. If you're a Christian, it is a great book to read. I have read a bunch of books on near-death experiences, but this little boy's book, when he says he walked with his grandfather when he passed away and he came back, and they put out pictures of his grandfather, and he walked over to the one when the grandfather was 25 years old and said, that was your grandfather and the one I walked with in heaven. That gives me great peace right there. So what are heaven and hell like? So this is the long one, but this is the one scripture reading that I believe tells us more about heaven in the Bible than anything else. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. Now see, that gives me a little peace too. Angels are going to come get you and me. Angels. This is Jesus talking, by the way. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. Many received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you is a great chasm. A great chasm has been fixed, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. He answered, Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment. Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. No, Father Abraham, he said, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. He said to him, If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. So what do we learn from that? First of all, several commentaries talk about this is the first time Jesus used a name in a parable. Angels. Billy Graham, who I revere, says that 2 angels come and take you from your deathbed to heaven. That gives me great peace. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that says that, but if Billy Graham says it, that's pretty doggone close for me. That's close enough. Then we have a rich man goes to torment, but he goes, it's more important to see that he goes to me alone. That's more important. I shouldn't say more important. That is important that he goes alone to this torment. And then we get to Lazarus is with Father Abraham. The rich man is alone again. Both could see each other. You know, I wonder sometimes if my dad can see me. I mean, I know I can't see him. Although I feel his presence, and my grandmother also, I wonder if they can see us. Now, we can't cross that expanse, and we have physical needs for water. The rich man was thirsty, and Lazarus had a finger. So we've got bodies, it appears. And the rich man remembers and possibly sees his brothers here on earth. And Abraham says that no one can cross the expanse between heaven and hell. So those are the things that I have learned from that. I want to share one more story with you. Pastor Dan talked about it today, and the other day, or several years ago, I was in a situation when I was teaching at UT in an undergraduate program. I had these 3 professors, and they were sitting in this room, and all 3 of the professors now, again, just like Dan talked about, just like Pastor Dan talked about. I don't know that I meant to tell you this story. I didn't say anything to Pastor Dan about this, but all 3 of those people saw me come in, and I'm just adjunct, so I don't work there all the time. I just cover for them in different places, which is what I like. That way I don't have to go to meetings. So they came over to me and they said, "We're having this argument. Can you help us?" One of the ladies, I had met her before, and the other 2 I had not met, so I met both of them, and they said, "Listen, we're having this argument. How can anybody who is smart, who has a PhD, believe in Jesus Christ?" And I looked at all 3 of them and I said, "Well, I do, without question." They said, "No, we're talking about Jesus Christ, that the Christians hang out with." I said, "Well, that's who I'm talking about." Then one of them said, "Well, let me tell you something. I don't believe in Jesus at all." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I said, "Do you read books?" "I have a bunch of books at my house." I said, "Well, let me bring you the Bible as a book to read. Why don't you just read that?" "Well, wait a minute. You're trying to convert me." I said, "No, I'm not. You tell me you love to read books. I'm just going to bring you a book. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll sign it in the front if you want me to." Because they were talking about having signatures in the front. And they said, "Well, I don't think that's a good idea." And I said, "So you're scared to read it?" And then we got down to the situation to where one of them told me, he said, "Well, let me tell you something. When you die, there's nothing left." I said, "Well, you may be true." And they said, "See there?" I said, "You may be true." But I said, "I believe there's a great deal of something left. I believe there's heaven left." I said, "But if you're right and I'm wrong, I haven't lost anything. But if I'm right and you're wrong, you've lost everything." And I don't know, they were scratching a variety of parts of their body as I left that room. So I'm not sure about the Bible being there for them. So I think, though, I want to leave you with this point. I want to leave you with the fact that heaven is real. In my research for 12 years, reading and studying and aggressively trying to figure out about that and how real is it, where is it, etc. Not that I'm not a Christian during that study. I'm a Christian looking at it. But I want to prove that my Father's in a good place. I want to prove to myself that we've got a good place. And so in looking at all that, I can tell you without question that heaven is real. It is a place where we're going to go where there's no pain. I'm going to leave you with this last story. There's this pastor that went to heaven. And when he got to heaven, he went to St. Peter, and St. Peter said, "According to the records here, you were a pastor for 35 years. He said, "That's correct." He said, "We've got a little cottage right over here underneath this waterfall." And he said, "Well, I thought we were going to have a mansion." He said, "Well, there's a cottage over there for you." Next guy up was a bus driver, just passed away. And St. Peter said, "We got a 17-room mansion up there on the hill above the waterfall for you." And the pastor heard this. So the pastor walks back over and said, I'm not one to complain. But I said, I've been a pastor for 35 years, and he drove a bus for 35 years, and I get a cottage, and he gets a 17-room mansion. And St. Peter looked at him, didn't miss a beat. He said, "Yes." He said, "When you preached, people slept. When he drove, people prayed." Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you.